welcome back to The Explainer. If you're joining us today, you already know the astronomical stakes of pharmaceutical manufacturing. I mean, we're operating in an industry where a single misstep, a tiny deviation in a formula, or even just a microscopic contaminant doesn't just mean a bad day at the office. It literally risks patient lives. We're talking about an absolute, uncompromising standard of safety here.
Okay, let's dive into this. Because the updated Schedule M Good Manufacturing Practices, they aren't just polite guidelines. They're a regulatory shield, specifically mandated by the government to protect the end patient. And today, we're zeroing in on a highly critical section of these rules. We are unpacking the final 5 main principles of Part 1 of Schedule M. Basically, these are the rules that dictate exactly how an operation closes the loop on safety.
So, here's our roadmap. We're covering 5 non-negotiable pillars today. Point 16 on preventing contamination, Point 17 on essential documentation, Point 18 on good production practices, Point 19 covering independent quality control, and finally Point 20 on validating computerized systems. Let's get right to it.
Kicking things off with the first of our final 5 pillars, Point 16, preventing contamination.
The core mandate here is exceptionally clear. Absolute vigilance is required to prevent contamination at every single physical touchpoint in your facility. The source material specifically points to equipment, starting materials, packaging materials, in-process materials, and of course finished products. There is zero gray area here. Water systems, air handlers, even operators' hands. Literally everything is a potential vector. The GMP rules demand a completely integrated, comprehensive approach to guarantee zero contamination throughout the entire life cycle of the drug.
Moving right along, we arrive at Point 17, essential documentation.
Now you know the famous golden rule in our industry. If a procedure isn't documented, well, it simply didn't happen. The text states emphatically, good documentation is an essential part of the quality assurance system. And why is that? Because documents eliminate guesswork. They exist to define the exact specifications and procedures for all materials and methods, making sure that every single operator on the floor knows exactly what to do and exactly when to do it. Let's see how this builds, because this golden rule dictates a strict life cycle for every single document in your facility. You can't just type something up and hand it out. According to the GMP guidelines, documents must be meticulously designed, prepared, reviewed, and then distributed with extreme care. They absolutely must be approved, signed, and dated by responsible persons. And unauthorized changes, no way. If a change is made, it's got to be signed, dated, and the original info must still be readable. This level of traceability is the absolute bedrock of compliance.
And of course, this documentation extends right to the physical product through labeling. Precise labeling guarantees traceability. At a bare minimum, your labels must clearly display the name of the drugs, the active ingredients and their amounts, the batch number, which is crucial for tracing the whole history, the expiry date, and storage conditions. This guarantees that authorized personnel have the exact unambiguous info they need before a batch is ever released.
Which perfectly tees up Point 18, good production practices.
I want you to think of production not just as manufacturing, but as a highly choreographed, high-stakes routine where every single movement is scripted. To put the regulatory text bluntly, follow the script. The rules state that deviations from instructions or procedures must be avoided as much as humanly possible. But hey, the real world happens, right? If a deviation does occur, you can't just brush it off. It demands immediate written approval from a designated person, and crucially, you've got to loop in the quality control department when appropriate.
Now, within production, your biggest enemy is cross-contamination. You are actively fighting the uncontrolled release of dust, gases, particles, and vapors. So how do we fight it? The guidelines lay out these critical defensive measures. You need proper air control and extraction. You must ensure personnel are wearing protective clothing, use closed systems in production whenever possible, rigorously test for residues, and use cleanliness status labels on all equipment. It's an all-out defense.
And that brings us to the absolutely critical concept of line clearance. Whether you're about to start a processing operation or a packaging run, this mandatory check is your ultimate safeguard against mix-ups. You have to ensure and, of course, document that the equipment and workstations are entirely clear of any previous products, product residues, labels, or documents that aren't needed for the current operation. Think of it as a hard reset before the curtain goes up on the next batch.
All right, on to Point 19, independent quality control.
Now we step into the domain of the independent watchdog. There is a very strict balance of power on the facility floor. Production executes the manufacturing operations. They follow the master formulas and get the product made. But quality control? They are the independent authority. The guidelines consider the independence of QC from production to be absolutely fundamental. QC has to be entirely separate so they can sample, test, and objectively approve or reject materials without feeling any pressure to just meet a production quota.
Because quality control isn't just a laboratory running chemistry experiments, QC is a fundamental decision-making authority over the product's fate. They are concerned with sampling, setting specifications, and testing to ensure that materials are not released for use and products are not released for sale until their quality is proven to comply with every single requirement. It's a massive responsibility.
And here is exactly how that authority plays out in the batch record review. First, all QC records are reviewed as part of the approval process. Second, any divergence or failure to meet specifications is thoroughly investigated, and yes, that investigation must be written down with clear conclusions and follow-up actions. Only then, step 3, is the batch transferred to the authorized person for final certification and release. No batch reaches the market without this exhaustive, independent scrutiny.
Now here is a really fascinating safety net built into the rules. Retention samples from each batch of finished product must be kept for at least 1 year after the expiry date. This is essentially a time machine for manufacturers. If a patient complaint or a mysterious defect pops up 2 years down the line, you actually have the physical means to look back in time, pull that exact batch from your retention storage, and test it to find the root cause. It's brilliant.
Finally, we've arrived at our last pillar. Point 20, validating computerized systems.
This one brings pharma safety squarely into the digital age. Look, today the digital backbone of modern pharma tracks literally everything we just talked about, but a software glitch can be just as deadly as a contaminated mixing tank. So the regulations state that any GMP-related computerized system absolutely must be validated. You have to prove the software works exactly as intended, and the depth of that validation depends on the diversity, the complexity, and the criticality of the system. Your digital machines require the exact same rigorous proof of reliability as your physical machines.
So let's pull all of this together. Points 16 through 20 of the Schedule M main principles. Preventing contamination, strict documentation, good production practices, independent quality control, and computer validation. These are not bureaucratic red tape designed to slow you down. They interlock to form a comprehensive, impenetrable shield. They guarantee that the pill a patient swallows is exactly what it claims to be, safe and effective.
Which leaves us with the most important consideration of all. Knowing that a single lapse in any of these areas can compromise the entire system, how will you ensure these 5 non-negotiable pillars are upheld in your own facility today? It really comes down to leadership, culture, and just a relentless attention to detail. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep pushing for quality.